because there is nothing backing our currency.
Well, just to, I guess, reinterpret what you're saying or look at it from a different angle, it's not that prices are rising. They only seem to rise within the inflationary system, within this illusory system that we're all stuck in, like a prisoner's dilemma, and we're all stuck in it. Prices are actually, they've been going down since 1960s. I mean, if you look at everything priced in money,
In gold.
I mean gold and silver, mostly gold, silver secondarily. But if you look at actual prices, they're going down. And so prices are only going up if you insist on maintaining your economic existence within the illusion itself. And you could say, okay, fine. So let's say I want to get out of the illusion and just, take all of my salary and just buy gold with it every month. Well, I understand you can't do that because you need to be liquid, and gold is not as liquid as dollars. It would be if we were on a gold standard, but it's not. So then you could say, so then, we are losing out. But it's not just that prices have been staying stable in gold. They've been falling in almost every category. And anything priced in gold is going down. So even if your dollar salary is less, right, then the amount of gold would keep going down with however much you could put away every month. Let's say you earn like $5,000 a month, and you put, $1,000 a month away or $500 a month away in gold and silver over 20 years, and each month it's less and less gold and silver because they keep going up, but you need less and less gold and silver to even have higher standards of living. So you can live outside of this illusion. And that's what I'm trying to get people to understand. It's not about, stacking and then becoming rich and then, using gold and silver to accumulate dollars. We're getting out of the illusion as much as we can. It's like, like a drug addict, right? If you're talking to a drug addict, you have to understand how they think, but you can't go completely into their world, but you care for them. So you need to communicate with them in a way that they think that you're on their planet. But, you have to, it's a very difficult position where we are, because we have to put a leg in the illusion and we have to keep a leg out of it and keep our minds together, it's very difficult even for people like us. It's all the more difficult for people who don't understand intuitively with the confidence that gold is actually money, and it still is today. That was the final piece that fell into place for me. That only, I think, in 2022 or something like that, when I finally understood, when it finally slipped into place that everything is really based on gold and silver, and this entire pyramid that we're living on. The higher we get on it, the thinner the air gets, and the more insane we become, keeping one leg in it while trying to keep one leg out. But we're keeping it together.
Especially when people say, why the hell do you have a leg over there to begin with? You're out of your mind. But you're exactly right. In fact, Rick Rule put out a very poignant post to your point just the other day. It said you'd be surprised how cheap real estate and food is if measured in gold. And that's very true. And I've recently talked about showing the price of a home in 2005, 20 years ago, and the price of gold. And using memory, the price of a home was $220,000 or whatever, and gold was just under 500. It was 4 something. And so the number was like 180 ounces of gold bought a house for you 20 years ago. Today, the house is 420,000. So the dollar is depreciated against real estate. Sure. But that 180 ounces of gold today is worth 180 would be worth what? My math is wrong here. Hold on. It's 400 ounces of gold, 380 ounces of gold that you would get, which is worth $1 million plus. So what, 400 into 200? Yeah, almost over 400 ounces of gold would buy you that house 20 years ago, which is worth $1.5 million today. It buys you 4 houses almost.
So I have something interesting to say about that. So I just finished a book. I think his name was Benjamin Roth, or he wrote a diary of the Great Depression. It was just this lawyer who lived in Youngstown, Ohio. And he was talking like in 1930, 1931, how the rabbi of his synagogue, I forgot what the name of the rabbi is, he talked about how much he was earning in 1930, and then he had to take a pay cut in 1931. I think it was like $5,000 a year, and he had to take a pay cut to like $4,000 or whatever it was. I forget the numbers, but I remember calculating that, so let's say he was earning X amount, whatever dollars it was. I calculated it in gold ounces. Today it would be $1 million a year. But this guy was earning in 1930, and he had to take a pay cut to like $800,000 a year. That was the Great Depression in gold terms. right? So the Great Depression was very, very difficult because people just they couldn't get any dollars because it was tethered to gold, so that they couldn't get an income at all. So a lot of them had to be reduced to barter, and one of the best investments back then was treasury bonds, right? Because they were the only things that were stayed. They weren't moving so much in value, but because they weren't moving nominally and everything else was moving down, the purchasing power of U.S. Treasury was skyrocketing. Right? So it's going to be the same thing this time, except we're going to go down a level in the pyramid from treasury bonds being the best investment to money itself.
How about silver? Something near and dear to all of us. Before you answer that question, I'll say something unusually unique is happening in silver, and that is the amount of deliveries we're seeing in COMEX. And like for the first 5 days of the August contract, we saw somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 or $7 billion worth of silver post for delivery, and much of it leaving COMEX. Now you're talking semi-trailers full. Something big is happening with silver and gold, and you can see it by the import numbers into the United States. I don't care what people say. It's tariffs, it's arbitrage. I say nonsense. Things are moving at a speed and in a direction that used to only be associated with the other countries, the Chinese, the Indians, the Russians. Now it's happening here. What goes through your mind now when you hear the word silver?
Well, a lot of people say, and I think they're correct, that we've talking about the pyramid, right? And gold is at the bottom, but underneath the gold is an even smaller triangle of silver in terms of value. Look, before gold was money, we talk about gold standard and going back to gold standard, and this is what we have to do. But really, it's not exactly that. It's really going back to silver is what we need to do, or what will be done. I understand that, trading silver coins is not economical in the sense that it's very bulky, and you can't actually exactly do that in today's world. But the human civilization started not on gold, but when we really started global trade and continents started trading in the Silk Road, and Africa started trading with Asia, and you really got a big economic system going, it was based on silver. And what happened in 1873, right, with the crime against silver, or what exactly they call it? I think it was the crime against silver. What happened was, who owned silver back then? It was the poor and the middle class. That's what they used for their money. What did rich people do? How did they store their wealth? They stored it in gold because they had too much silver. They couldn't store it all. Right? And so they had a lot of gold. So what's the best way, if the middle class and the poor, and there's a lot more middle class and poor than there are rich, what's the best way to take purchasing power from the middle class and the poor and give it to the rich? If you're on a silver standard, move to a gold standard, right? That's how you do it. But like everything that the government does in order to keep the pyramid going is basically a theft of the middle class and the poor, for the favor of the rich. So at the end of this, it's going to be a silver standard, not necessarily a gold standard. Going back to gold would be better where we are now. But the real end of the inflationary system is when credit is going to collapse. When credit collapses, dollars don't work, and if dollars don't work, none of the other currencies work either, because that's what we say reserve currency, right? That's currency that's in the basement of all these other central banks. So when the dollar falls, or these other currency falls, all credit falls, all credit derivatives, and then you're left with all the purchasing power of all that lost purchasing power gets vacuumed into silver, even more than gold, which is why we're going to go eventually to very near a 15-to-1 ratio, which is the historic exchange ratio, monetary exchange ratio between gold and silver. That's natural economic law. That's not
Coming out of the ground right now, it's 7-to-1. My buddy Keith Newmeyer swears by it as CEO of First Majestic.
And we could actually go there. I mean, we've been there in the past briefly. Like during economic crises of the past, after major wars, it did go to 7-to-1 briefly. I don't think that's an equilibrium, but I do think it's possible to get there.
How close are we, you think, to some form? One of the pushbacks that we get from people who lack maybe the proper perspective in this industry, people who come in this industry looking to profit, which is not the way to do it. I've looked at gold and silver my whole career as wealth. wealth that has outlived everything the world has ever thrown at it. 2 world wars, German hyperinflation, the Great Depression, every pandemic. It was mentioned, gold and silver cumulatively. If anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, it's you. I think between the two of them, over 700 times in the Bible. It is money. I think even, isn't the Hebrew word for money silver?
Kesef, yeah.
Yes. So, um, the people who listen to the things that people like you and I talk about, and it doesn't materialize through the overt central bank, commercial bank manipulation, all the goings on COMEX and the LBMA, the counterintuitive nature of it. And I've talked ad nauseum why I believe the price of silver has been held down, and that people who want to know how I feel about that can easily figure that out. But in your mind, how close are we to that? And what does the United States look like, maybe in your mind, 5 years, 10 years? I know I asked you two questions there, but to me they're kind of related. So where do you think silver goes? How close are we to it? And what does this country look like? Is there possibility of getting to the other side, or do we have to go, in your mind, through some form of a reckoning period in order to, get to the other side?
We have to go through a reckoning. That's natural law. Like, just as all debts are paid either by paying the debt or defaulting, all theft is paid too. Because when you steal, that value, when you make an exchange of two people and they're both benefiting, legitimate, when you steal, one loses at the expense of the other. And so you have a net negative effect on society. So when you have a society that operates through these sorts of theft systems, those thefts and those debts are going to be paid one way or another. Now, I have no dollar figure for where silver is going to go in the end game, but I do believe strongly that the end game bell. How do we know when this is all over? Like, the bell's ringing. Okay, well, the dollar has collapsed. It's going to be at a 15-to-1 gold to silver ratio, one that's relatively stable. I'm not saying like we hit it one day, like in 1980 it happened for a day and a half or something. I'm saying this time it's going to stay that way until we can rebuild a basic economic system again. So it could be a year or two, 3. I don't know, but I'm saying it's going to be stable enough that silver supplies can filter through the economic system, physical silver supplies, and that figuratively almost literally creates a base of wider silver dispersal where you can rebuild another credit pyramid, hopefully an honest one where all debts are paid and you don't have fractional reserve or however you think the banking system functions. Well, what does the United States look like? I really don't know, which is why, frankly, I don't want to live here. I don't know what Israel's going to look like either. I'd rather be with my people than being here, precisely because I don't know. I would imagine that states could break off from the federal government. The federal government could dissipate, and you could have regions, different regions. Like, if the South had won the Civil War, you'd have the Confederate States and the northern United States. So, might break into a few pieces. I think there's going to be serious trouble in the very big cities like in LA, New York, Chicago, Minneapolis, where you're from. These places that are morally rotting, they're not going to do very well. But I think outside of that, you will have Americans, and America will exist. The United States as it exists now, I don't know. I can't say yes. I can't say no. It might reorganize into some looser government or Articles of Confederation or something, or California, New York could cede and then leave the more fiscally responsible states into some other union. It could be anything. I just hope that we get through it with the minimal amount of suffering.
Well, is the pyramid then being built with stable coins and the Genius Act in that case? Because the whole premise of the Genius Act is that stablecoin issuance will be backed 1-to-1 with treasuries. In my mind, they are trying to fill a void for the folks out there that are tired of holding our treasuries in this inflationary world, being stolen from. Where you look at last year as an example, as an alternative, gold was up 40% and the 10-year treasury was up 4%. You look at it this year, halfway through the year, the 10-year treasury is up 2.25%. Gold's up 35%, the dollar's down 11%. It's a losing proposition. So we are seeing entities around the world sell treasuries in favor of things like gold. Do you see this Genius Act, the stablecoin issuance, as a way to mask the inflation that you're speaking of through the issuance of stablecoins that are backed one-to-one by treasuries?
Well, I find it extremely ironic that the name of the act is the stable
Right.
coin. They put the word stable in it.
Yeah.
Or what was it? The
Inflation Reduction
Inflation
Act.
Reduction
Yes.
Act means the inflation acceleration.
Right.
Whatever the name is, it's the exact opposite of what's happening.
Yeah.
Right. So, look, aside from the technicals or the technicalities of how it works and how it stabilizes the pyramid, what it is essentially is another layer of this inverted pyramid that we're running. So they have the top of the pyramid wherever it is, right? I think the top is crypto. Some people might disagree with me. It's okay. You can speculate on crypto if you want. I'm not against that. But the top of the pyramid now is like, okay, we got to build another floor. So it's going to be the stable act. It's going to be a blockchain, and you cannot stabilize a pyramid by making it bigger. Right? It doesn't work. What might end up happening is
Unless you make the base bigger.
Yeah, unless you make the base bigger. In order to make the base bigger, you have to widen the gold and silver triangle
And uninvert the pyramid.
Yeah, that's going to kill people.
Right. No.
Yeah. What could happen with this stable coin act or the Genius Act or whatever it is? It could temporarily increase liquidity for treasury bills or whatever's going to be on the other side of the stable coin.
Yep.
But if they're going to be backed one-to-one, there's no mathematical way to use this as an inflationary force without printing the dollars backing one-to-one on these stable coins. So then you could say, okay, maybe they're going to fractional reserve the thing, right, and create more stable coins, and they create dollars, and then stable coins will be like another dollar derivative. I don't know exactly what they're going to do, but however it ends up being built, it's just the pyramid getting bigger and bigger, and then on the base of it is still the same amount of gold and silver, or even less. So the end game is going to come whatever they try. There's nothing they can do to stop it.
If there was an answer, I'd certainly like to know it. What do you see? Because you see getting to that point, don't you see a stumbling block in between?
That is the inevitable point. We're on the way to it. Just to respond to what you said most recently first, Gresham's law, it's not exactly bad money drives out good. And Rothbard made this distinction. He's like, this is not a good definition. It's not bad and good. It's artificially overvalued money drives out artificially undervalued money, right? The dollar, the paper dollar or the digital dollar or the stable coin backed dollar, whatever form the dollar is, it's worth intrinsically nothing. The gold is the good money, and it's undervalued because if it were backed one-to-one with every dollar, it would be something like $40,000, $50,000, and it's only valued at $3,400. So it's artificially undervalued. Once gold is valued as at par with the dollar, whatever that is, either we get there legislatively and they say, oh, we're on a gold standard now at this exchange rate. I don't think that's going to happen. Or the market forces it like it did in 1980. And what happened in 1980, the way Daniel Oliver of Myrmikan Capital puts it, is that if you look at the Fed's balance sheet, the valuation of the gold on their balance sheet more than 100% balanced all the other assets, all the debt, all the treasuries, and all the other crap they had. The amount of gold in 1980 valued at 850 backed every other liability by 100%. That functionally is a gold standard.
I think we were net creditors in 1980, though, weren't we? Pretty damn close to it, if not.
Yeah, and the debt was a lot lower. So that's all that needs to happen. Once the gold that's on the Fed's balance sheet balances out the rest of the liabilities, all the other debt that's on it, that means that gold is at a certain valuation that balances all of the treasuries. Then you have fair value treasuries, fair value dollar. You can freeze
But
it
that's
there.
what I'm saying. In other words, you revalue gold. Now, you're taking it to a whole other step. To pay off the debt, gold would have to be very, very high. Very high.
Yeah.
But in essence, that's devaluing the dollar.
Yes.
That would enable you to bring back your manufacturing. So maybe we're not so far off, because I don't know how else you do it. One way or the other, I think you can't be reliant on the world to produce, pretend you're the superpower of the world and have to rely on the world to provide you all of the tools that you need for military components, for pharmaceuticals, for microchips. And during COVID, you had millions of cars sitting in lots waiting for the microchips that we can't produce as, as the leaders of thought and technology and all of the things that the United States is so good at. We are subservient to the rest of the world for these things. Can't happen. It's interesting when you go down these rabbit holes, Rafi. I could sit and talk with you forever. We just cracked a couple bottles of Manischewitz.
It's disgusting.
I know. That's the first time I ever got drunk. I think I had a very bad headache at about 13 years old. That was the
That
last
must have
time
been
that
horrible.
happened. But
Sorry, man.
yeah,
Let's pick up right where that convo left off and talk like we're on a late night walk, sleeves rolled up, trying to make sense of the mess. What Rafi said about living with one leg inside the fiat illusion and one leg outside it, that's the balancing act a lot of sane people are quietly practicing now. You keep your working capital in the system because bills are due in dollars and rent doesn't take Krugerrands, but you steadily siphon your surplus into things that don't need anyone's promise to be valuable tomorrow. Gold, silver, a paid-off skill set, a resilient network, call it your reality bucket. I don't think that's doom. That's just refusing to outsource your stability to a committee that writes minutes. The tricky part is psychological. Fiat makes you feel rich in ways that are hard to give up. A brokerage app with a green arrow is engineered dopamine. A 10 Oz a bar sitting in a safe is inert. But if you measure in purchasing power instead of pixels, you notice how weird the last decade has been. Food portions shrink, premium subscriptions multiply, and you're still told inflation is anchored. Meanwhile, in real money terms, a lot of stuff has quietly gotten cheaper over long arcs. That's the crazy irony. The more you price life in ounces instead of dollars, the less panicky it feels. You're not racing inflation. You're stepping outside its track. Now, on the policy circus, Powell's been doing his best stern dad voice about sticking to 2% inflation, which the Fed finally put in writing back in 2012 after years of hand-waving. The number didn't descend from Sinai. New Zealand popularized it in the late 80s, and the Fed made it explicit decades later. But the symbolism matters. When he re-upped that target at Jackson Hole, the line was basically, we wandered, we came back, we're serious again. Even as markets heard, cut soon, but trust us later. The public hears consistency, Wall Street hears optionality. And that mismatch is how you end up with people both bracing for higher rates longer and betting on near-term easing. Schrodinger's tightening. Against that backdrop, the politics are getting louder. If you've noticed more noise about the Fed's independence, you're not imagining it. The institution was always a political compromise wrapped in technocratic clothing, but the gloves come off when inflation bites and fiscal needs balloon. The more Treasury has to refinance and the more Congress spends without a plan to tax for it, the more convenient it is to guide the central bank toward the path of least pain. Inflation today, apologies tomorrow. Markets can pretend that's not a regime change until the regime changes, and then, bang, risk premia reprice. That's why I keep hearing Rafi's pyramid line in my head. You don't stabilize an upside-down pyramid by stacking new floors on top. You widen the base or you wait for gravity. Which brings us to the weirdest new floor they just bolted on. Stablecoins. The U.S. finally passed a federal framework this summer, the Genius Act, meant to corral dollar-pegged tokens into something that plugs neatly into the regulated banking stack. On paper, it's prudent. 1-1 reserves, oversight, clarity for issuers. In practice, you've just created a new software-native distribution rail for dollar claims that can scale globally at internet speed. That's either brilliant or terrifying, depending on whether you think more dollar plumbing reduces risk or just hides it better. And yeah, it does marginally help the front end of the Treasury complex if stablecoin reserves live in T-bills. But remember the pyramid. If you don't widen the base, real savings, real collateral, you're just spreading the same load over a larger, thinner sheet of glass. The first time redemptions spike or a custody stack hiccups, we'll find out if 1-1 is a policy or a practice. You asked about Trump, so let's deal with the elephant in the trading room. Setting aside anyone's feelings about him, the broad outline is easy to parse. Tariffs raise domestic prices in the short run, pressure the Fed politically to offset the growth drag, and complicate the inflation fight Powell says he's recommitted to. At the same time, there's a stated desire to reshore manufacturing, which, in a long cycle sense, could be healthy. Less brittle supply chains, maybe better wage power for blue-collar work. But reindustrialization on a short fuse almost always means higher capex needs, subsidized financing, and tolerance for price pressures. That's not a low-inflation cocktail. The optimistic scenario is a painful reset followed by productivity gains. The pessimistic one is stagflation with patriotic branding. Either way, just buy more duration stops being a simple plan. So where do metals fit if that's the macro mix? I'd split it this way. Gold is your don't make me think hedge for institutional credibility risk. Every time the policy apparatus looks cornered, debt ceiling theater, yield curve control chatter, another rethink of the framework, gold gets a bid. You don't need apocalypse, you just need enough people who manage other people's money to say, let's hold a bar while they sort this out. Silver is different. It's a monetary metal with a very real industrial backbone. Solar, electronics, electrification, and that dual identity is exactly why it whipsaws. In the short run, if growth wobbles or PMIs dip, silver can get punched. In the longer arc, if we keep shoving electrons through everything and simultaneously normalize silver as money adjacent again, that ratio everyone quotes starts walking down the stairs. You don't need 7-1 fairy tales, you just need 15-1 to hang around for a while, and it's a totally different wealth transfer than most portfolios are positioned for. That's what I liked about Andy's bell rings at 15-1 line. He's not promising a date, he's pointing to a condition. You'll know a phase shift happened not because CNBC says new paradigm, but because the spread between metals compresses and stays compressed while physical actually moves. It's less a price event and more a plumbing event. Refinery runs, coin and bar premiums normalizing at higher bases, delivery outflows staying bid, and the retail drought giving way to institutional accumulation that doesn't tweet. If that sticks for a year or two, you can rebuild an honest credit stack on top of it. Not a utopia, just a system that punishes bad underwriting with losses instead of with press conferences. On Gresham's law, Rafi's nuance is important. The bumper sticker version is bad money drives out good, but the useful version is overvalued drives out undervalued. If the state fixes the price relationship between two monies, people hoard the undervalued one and spend the overvalued. That's why when officialdom sets the parities wrong, gold and silver vanish from circulation. They're not gone. They're just waiting in drawers until the price lies stop being enforced by statute or stigma. Translate that to now, and you get why coins disappear when fear rises. You don't want to spend the thing that might be mispriced to the upside in the future. Let me be clear about one thing. A lot of metalheads hand wave. You still need cash flow. Ounces don't pay your quarterly tax estimate. The best real-world game plan I've seen is boring and balanced. Keep your burn in boring dollars, your buffer in a short ladder of safe, liquid stuff you can sell on a Monday morning, and your ballast in metal you don't plan to sell for at least a cycle. If you want to get fancy, map your liabilities. 6 months of expenses in cash and T-bills, then a sleeve of metal matched to multi-year goals you'd otherwise invest in long duration. If rates fall faster than inflation because the politics overpower the framework, your fixed income sleeve wins. If credibility wobbles or fiscal dominance peeks through, your metal sleeve wins. If both wobble, you're glad you had a bar and a job. The Fed piece is where I get the most pushback from friends. They'll never allow X on, as if they have a single mind or the world obeys neat lines. We don't need conspiracies, we need incentives. Politicians need growth into elections and someone else to blame for the hangover. Central bankers need a narrative that lets them be wrong for a while without losing the franchise. Voters need affordability, not equations. Big buyers of debt need a reason to hold duration that doesn't make them look like the last fools in musical chairs. That logic tree doesn't cry for disciplined, Volcker-style austerity unless something breaks so hard, there's no alternative. In the meantime, the easiest marginal move is jawbone 2%, act a bit easier than your rhetoric, and pray productivity bails you out. If it doesn't, temporary becomes framework review. And we do this dance again a few years from now with different names at the table and the same constraints on the page. Brookings, if you want a hopeful angle, it's this. Discipline scales bottom up. You don't need a new Bretton Woods to make your own balance sheet saner. You can definancialize parts of your life. Pay the thing off, own tools, build redundancy, value skills that aren't mark to market. That's not anti-progress, it's anti-fragile. And if enough households do that quietly, the macro shock absorbers get thicker. Weirdly, that also makes you less doctrinaire about gold. Once you trust your personal solvency, metal isn't a crusade. It's just part of your working capital plan for a world that can't decide what money wants to be. As for a Trump-era gold move or some dramatic repeg, I wouldn't design my life around theatrics. Could you get a stealth revaluation by the market, not a podium, if confidence phrase and the Fed's balance sheet optics look awkward? Sure, we saw in 1980 how a market-driven gold price can, for a moment, make the official books look balanced without a formal standard. But relying on that moment as your only hedge is like planning your commute around a lightning strike. The more obvious path is muddle through, more digital rails for dollars, hello, stablecoins, more temporary policy flexibility, and a gentle nudge for savers to take more risk than they want. Metals help you say no thanks without moving to a cabin. One last thought, less finance, more human. People who read history tend to panic less, not because the past was pretty, but because it was survivable. The Tower of Babel bit isn't about bricks. It's about centralized hubris and the counter-move life makes toward decentralization. We're living our own version with code and coins and communities. Whether you're stacking silver or stacking skills, you're voting for dispersion over control. And if there's a fourth turning feeling in your chest, okay. Acknowledge it, then do useful things. Grow your base. Keep momentum small and daily. Don't wait for a bell to ring at 15-1 to start living sanely. So yeah, keep a leg in and a leg out. Use the system. Don't worship it. Hold some metal. Don't preach it. Watch the ratio. Don't bet the house on a date. Expect the policy story to flex with the news, because it will. And when markets argue with speeches, assume markets are telling you who really has the burden of proof. On that day or week or year, your boring bar is going to feel a lot less inert than it looks.